guys, hope you're all doing well. I want to do something a little bit different today, and I want to speak about anxiety and everything that entails of my experience with anxiety and all that, but I decided we might as well take a nice walk through Skyrim while I talk about these things, but I'm going to make this very clear at the start. When I'm trying to talk about stuff and actually have meaning to it, I will get very all over the place because my mind does not do things very well. I've made a little list of how I want things to go, but there's a high chance I will just get distracted, wander, but I'll try and keep on track. But I do want to, my main anxieties I'm going to be covering, because not anxiety is the same, it's always loads of different types, is just general anxiety, social anxiety, and a new one I never knew about until like 3 weeks ago, which is anticipatory anxiety, which is basically the excessive worry about future events that haven't happened yet, which I just thought was normal anxiety, but apparently it's its own thing. So, but then the main three I'm going to be covering, because they're the ones I've dealt with as such, so I kind of just want to speak about them, and you guys might get some use out of it, or it's just at least someone you might relate to, sort of thing. So, first thing, for anyone who doesn't know, general anxiety is basically any anxiety. Oh, okay, she can do that. But it's basically any anxiety that persists and interferes with your daily life, essentially. So whether that's like going down to the shops, or you've got a test coming up, any of that sort of stuff is kind of general anxiety, which is, I mean, anxiety is pretty normal to begin with. Like, it's there to protect you at the end of the day. It's just some people have it a lot more of the time when you don't really need it so much. But yeah, so that's just the general anxiety stuff. Then you've got social anxiety, which is more of the fear of being judged by people and being embarrassed in public, and just basically anything to do with people's opinions of you, typically, which can also affect how you eat, what you do in your day, that sort of stuff, to the point where some people have it so bad even leaving the house causes a great deal of anxiety, which I think also causes agoraphobia. I think it goes into, not too sure about that though, but yeah, so that can also be pretty bad. And then anticipation anxiety is one I'm currently dealing with, and to be brutally honest, don't know how you solve that yet, because I'm still learning with it, but that's more the one I'll get into more later, I think. But it's basically just where you excessively worry about a future event without actually any real reason to worry about it, and more putting stuff is out of your control. It's like, if say you had a trip coming up, for instance, you'll be worried about all the stuff you couldn't control during the trip and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of a weird thing to me, because I'm fairly new to it. But yeah, the next thing I do want to say is anxiety. Like, you should never feel ashamed of having anxiety, because loads, like millions of people have it, and everyone probably has it daily. Well, most people have it daily. So it's not really something you don't feel ashamed about. You should kind of just accept that you've got it and not put yourself down for it, because loads of people have it. Which is something I had to tell myself a lot in the early days, because in the early days when you first get it or you first have it, you think you're the only person who ever feels like this. Because you see everywhere online and everywhere, everyone you know, they don't show they have anxiety typically. Just like how when you have anxiety, you probably rarely show it to people. But because no one shows it, everyone thinks they're the only one with it, sort of thing. But I know through me and people I'm close to, loads of people get anxiety. Some get worse than others, though, but it's not an uncommon thing for loads of people to get, so. And the next thing you don't want to do is you don't necessarily want to try and change everything at once. So let's say you've got anxiety about, say, like social interactions, for instance. You don't want to be like trying to change everything too much. Let's say you can't even speak to people, yeah. the last thing you want to do is say like go and do social speaking or something like in front of public crowds or whatever, because that would be too much. You want to start small, so you kind of want to start with like small goals or like small targets that are easily achievable, but put you slightly out of your comfort zone, but not excessively. It's like one of the things I've done, because my general anxiety used to be incredibly bad. Like I would worry about things that weren't even possible as such, and that was when my brain was basically going overdrive. And just any situation I ever had, it came up with the worst scenario possible that is not even possible realistically. So, but the way I used to go about dealing with it was mainly by, because my brain would come up with the most unbelievable things possible, is I'd just be like, I've been alive for what, 20 years, 22 years. At the time I was like 16, 18, that sort of age. And I was like, that's never happened, ever, since I've been alive. So what's the chance of it happening the next day or when this thing happens? So that was my main way of dealing with it, because I was like, by that logic, it shouldn't really happen because it's very unlikely. Yeah, we just need to save this dude. Okay, you decide. So that was my main way of dealing with stuff, because I was like, if it's not happened yet, why would it happen now, sort of thing. And for my brain, that was enough to convince it that my anxiety was kind of unneeded. But that kind of helped solve that sort of general anxiety where just anything would make it kind of start up. But then dealing with the social anxiety I had was very bad. I had it, so any speaking to people gave me anxiety. Public speaking, or like speaking in front of a crowd or anything, I hated it. The only people I could really speak to were my close friends at the time, and even still, if I was in like a loud environment, I'll say, I would still have a lot of issues with it. Now, one of the main causes for me with that was when I was in school still. I had quite a bad stutter, which if you watch my videos enough, you might see every now and again it still comes out. But that was one thing, so whenever I would speak, I would often have a stutter, and then that made it quite hard to then speak normally. So that was kind of my issue with my social anxiety and speaking with people. But the way I overcame my being, I would say, ashamed of my stutter, because it's perfectly like, I can't control it, so it's not really my issue. But it was just one of the things that occurred. And also when I was anxious, it would occur, and then because I was anxious about speaking to people, it would come up, so it's kind of like an endless loop really. But I found my one way to deal with that was to kind of just record videos. This was on one of my old channels back in the day. I would just record videos of me playing COD or whatever with my voice. It wouldn't upload them or nothing because I was too scared to. And then I found with time, I became used to hearing my voice, and then I found my voice was then normal. Hence why I'm doing videos today with it, because granted this was like 2016 when I started doing that, but I found with time it became a lot more normal to hear my voice. Then I realised my voice isn't actually that different. So even when I have a start, I'm like, it's quite normal. Loads of people have starts, it's fine. So that's then how I dealt with that. Because once you find out what kind of triggers your anxiety, it can help you then find a way to ease that anxiety you get. So, which I found for me, talking to people, I used to find very anxious, still kind of do at times, but I found that was made a lot less by just the fact I got rid of my anxiety with my stutter, which was my main cause of it. Granted, if I'm still speaking to someone new for the first time, I will be shitting myself, but I just kind of tell myself that's normal, and you just kind of got to work up to getting comfortable with it, which is the main painful thing I find with anxiety, is the more you run away from it, kind of the stronger it gets, but the more you face it, the scarier it is to face. So it's kind of like, you gotta face it, but it's scary, and you're anxious of it, so it's kind of not a nice thing to deal with, I'll say that much. But it's also a tough thing where if you can slowly face it, then eventually it's not bad anymore because you become like used to it. But obviously, as someone who's been through that, I know it's a lot harder said than done. So my main tip would be to start very small, like as small as you could possibly think of. And if it's still too big, try and find a way to make it smaller. And then eventually you'll become to something you can do that will cause you like a tiny bit of anxiety, but not as much to put you off the idea in the first place. But because I will say one of the mistakes I did make, especially with my social anxiety and kind of just anxiety in general, was if I was anxious to meet people, I would go out my way to not meet new people, which then ended up with me not really leaving the house much because I was scared to meet new people. Because I didn't meet people, every person was a new person, so I was like, that was very anxiety inducing for me. But then I eventually still am kind of learning to pick up the courage to go and meet new people. But one of the things I did do was my sister and her boyfriend I had not met, and they'd been going out for like 3 years or whatever. And I was like, I should probably meet him because my sister wanted me to, but she knew of my anxiety and stuff, so she was very like, doing your own time sort of thing. And I remember one day, I was thinking about my anxiety that I should meet new people, but before I had the chance to think, they were around one day, and I was up in my room just kind of hiding away sort of thing. And I then decided, what if I just went down and just said hello? And I didn't think anything else past just going down and saying hello. Anything after that, I was like, not my issue. Like, and I found I finally broke it down enough, so I want to think, because before what my brain would do, I'd think, I'll go down and say hello, then say this, and then I'd panic and then think, what if they do this, what they do, all the what ifs. But I found that if I just had the initial thought of just go down, say hello, and then not just stop after that, then I didn't have anything to worry about because there was my brain, I just stopped thinking of it. Which again, I know is easier said than done, but that did kind of work for me though. But every time I still meet new people, still I'm terrified of it. And this was someone who I knew was a decent person, knew quite a bit about him in a way, so I was like, it was a bit of a weird thing to begin with, so. But yeah, but it's just little stuff like that that you can then eventually overcome, and then speaking to new people should become easier. I say should because I still don't like to speak to new people, but if I have to, I can do it. Because one of my other things is I don't like awkward conversations, and I always think I'm awkward in conversations, but I've heard from speaking to new people, mainly from people around me when I speak to new people, is they've all said I'm not awkward at all. If anything, I'm quite calm and stuff, so I was like, but in my head, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing someone very awkward, anxious, and wants to leave the situation. But I've heard from other people, I sound like a normal person, essentially. Which is the thing with anxiety, most stuff makes you seem worse than what it is, or what you think it is, because your brain basically lies to you. But that's enough. I'm like, it's the same sort of thing, I guess, if you're out and about or whatever, and you hear people speaking. If you've got bad social anxiety, you're going to think they're speaking about you, but realistically, they might not be. Like, there's a chance they might be, but most of the time they're probably not. Probably having their own conversation or something, and because your anxiety tells you that they're speaking about you, you believe it, so then it kind of ends up eating away, sort of thing. But yeah, so that's the main thing with anxiety, I find, is that you're basically trying to fight your brain the entire time against it, because your brain's essentially trying to help you stay alive. That's the job of anxiety. Like, it's meant to be, if there's a threat that causes you danger, it's meant to give you anxiety, so if you know of said danger and can run away from the danger. However, in our lives today, we don't really have life-threatening stuff often, which I should hope not anyway, but like, so our brain gets bored and basically says, I'm bored, let's give you some anxiety about random stuff, and it makes up its own scenarios and all of that stuff. So it's kind of a really weird thing how your brain does that, but your brain's your brain in it, so. But yeah, the next mistake that I didn't make, because I was very aware of this to begin with, is to not rely on like alcohol, any sort of drugs, gambling, any sort of that stuff that can help relieve anxiety. Because I know the main one people do if they got like social anxiety or that sort of stuff is if they're going out, or especially to like clubs and stuff, they'll have a drink of alcohol, whatever, just so they're then feeling calm, relaxed. Which, if you've not got anxiety, I guess can work. I'm not particularly a drinker in a way, so I can't really say too much about the facts of that. But yeah, if you do have anxiety, try and avoid it, because you'll then become dependent on it, and then you won't be able to do nothing without it, and then that leads to alcoholism and all that stuff. And same with like gambling, it can all lead to basically very bad addictions. So I would recommend not going that way. But yes, that's kind of all the stuff not to do that I found useful. Granted, the alcohol one is one I didn't do really, so. But yeah, the next thing is I'd like to speak about basically how to support someone who has anxiety. Because I know lots of things have to come from the person with anxiety themselves, but if you know someone who has bad anxiety, then there might be some ways you think might help, but they might not actually be helping, because some of them kind of been counterproductive, I guess. So I know one of the things I found that helped me the most when people done was I needed someone to listen. First thing, actually, first tip, if you want to help someone with anxiety, just listen. Because if you've got someone you care about enough and they are open enough to share with you their anxiety, just listen. They'll probably tell you what they need quite easily, or at least you can read between the lines to figure out what they need, like. But yeah, because I find the main thing that helped me was I was surrounded by loads of people. Not loads, but like a good 6, 7 people I could speak to. And they understood my anxiety and didn't force me to do stuff, but also didn't allow me to kind of accept it, sort of thing. They were like, you got anxiety, but you need to actually progress, but they wouldn't force me to like go do stuff that I wasn't ready for. Because that's then obviously going to make my anxiety worse and make me more scared of them things, so that wouldn't really work. It kind of needs to become when you're ready, you then work up to it, and then you do the thing that gave you big anxiety. But I found the main thing that really helped is just generally speaking to people, because I found when you speak to people about your anxiety, your worries and all that stuff, it does two things. Either they can reassure you and kind of comfort you and that sort of thing, or if you're anxious about something that is kind of a bit unlikely, when you're saying it, you'll think this sounds a bit silly, and then you kind of then reassess what you're actually anxious about, and that can help your brain kind of process what it's actually doing. Because whenever I tell people about my stuff I was anxious about, by the end of it, I'll be speaking, and if they were good, they would let you listen and maybe ask questions here and there, and you would find the stuff I'm anxious about is actually not relevant to anything, it's just my brain kind of just going overboard, but I find it, because you can think in your head a lot, but that doesn't help. If you actually speak to someone, you notice how kind of weird some of the things you're anxious about are, so then it might give you some perspective with it. But it kind of also, it does help if you've got just anyone you can trust as well, which I know not everyone has, but then you could maybe go on, I don't know where exactly, but there's places online and people you can call therapists and stuff who might be able to give you some assistance. But I'd say, yeah, find someone you can talk to is the main thing, and also don't try and do it all on your own, because speaking with someone can lighten the load so much, which then just makes it a whole lot easier. So yeah, and I'd say another thing to bear in mind is if you're on social media a lot, especially like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, that stuff can make your anxiety just quite a bit worse as it is, because you're seeing like from my personal experience, I found if I was ever kind of anxious about leaving the house or like what I look like, all this sort of general social anxiety and leaving the house anxiety stuff, I found going on like social media was the worst thing, because you see people going out having fun, you think you're missing out, you then compare yourself to them. Comparing yourself to people is the worst thing about social, about like online, like Instagram, Twitter, all the social media stuff. Is you compare yourself to all these people that typically aren't putting up their real self anyway. So you're comparing yourself to like an unrealistic standard. But with anxiety though, it does make it a lot worse because you already have quite low standards of yourself anyway, and then you compare yourself to someone's unrealistic standards. So then your brain basically says, I should be like this, but that's not how they really like either. So the other thing is most people online probably have some form of anxiety or mental health issue anyway, so it's like you shouldn't compare yourself to them, because unless you know them personally and you know them really well, you're not going to know if they have anxiety issues or not. So that's just something to bear in mind, really. Like, is there a dragon nearby? Please don't be a dragon. Okay, so I do not want to deal with you now. Right, we're just going to quickly teleport before he attacks us, because I don't want to deal with a dragon right now. But yeah, so just kind of bear that in mind with social media, because especially monitor how long you're on social media for. Because the thing with anxiety is a lot of your thoughts can kind of be learned through, like if you're on social media for most of the day, your brain's going to be taking in most of that. So therefore, when you're now just doing normal stuff, your brain's going to be having all them anxiety thoughts that you had when you were looking at the social media sort of stuff. And also, my last point I'll say, to really help with anxiety, is to practice like the mindfulness and just positive thoughts, because essentially what you think in your day-to-day life will affect how your brain responds to certain situations and stuff, which is one thing I'd spend a lot of time working on, because the way my brain would often think about myself was typically like, if I didn't want to do something, I'd call myself a pussy and then tell myself to do it, which did work with a few things, but with anxiety you kind of need to use more compassion, I guess, is more the thing you need to use, which is like to this day I'm still learning how to do, because it's not something that comes naturally to my brain. Like, I've always had a very direct, sort of harsh approach with my body, with my brain and body and everything, where sometimes you need to kind of almost think of yourself as someone else, and you'll probably treat yourself a lot nicer. So I find that's what I have to do, because I think if I knew someone was in my exact place as me, like same situation, same mental state, everything, how would I speak to them? And I found 9 out of 10 times I would be a whole lot nicer. But just kind of trying to keep that mindset when you're not in the best of mindsets, because that's the issue. Like, when I'm in a good mindset and my head's clear, I can think nice about myself all the time. But it's when you're in, like, when you've got filled with anxiety, depression, whatever you are dealing with, you will kind of always just default to what your brain wants to default as. So you kind of need to be very aware of it and kind of make it your default is to be nice to yourself, sort of thing. And another little tip, which is kind of standard for general anxiety, is just to get your brain not thinking about what it's trying to think about. And there's many ways to do this. Like, a lot of people use like music to do it, because then you think about music, not about whatever else. Or you can, I think that's called the free rule, or there's a version of it. Basically, it's like 3 things you can see, 3 things you can touch, and 3 things you can hear. Then if you're focusing looking for all of them things, you're not going to be as focused on the thing causing your anxiety, or your brain to even be able to have a chance to think about your anxiety. So if you can kind of get into the habit of constantly doing them things whenever you start feeling a little bit anxious, you won't give your brain a chance to build upon it and then make it worse. Which is something I am, even to this day, will still practice often, because my anxiety is kind of weird at times, but like, for the most part, I don't let it get to me too much, or not as bad as what it could get to me, I should say. And that's also the other thing, is that you kind of need to get used to the fact that having some anxiety is normal. So the more you kind of get anxiety, rather than like when you get that like the anxiety that makes you want to run away, you need to think, rather than wanting to run away, but sometimes just to kind of just acknowledge it's there, but not let it sway your thoughts, sort of thing. So if say you're really anxious about doing this performance or test or job interview or whatever you got in your life happening, just kind of acknowledge it's there, but don't give it any power, sort of thing. So don't let it think, oh, this is going to happen, and then use all your coping mechanisms. You could search online, there's probably a bunch more I don't know of because I haven't looked too heavily into it, but there's probably all sorts of stuff that can work, and everyone's different, so find what works for you to enable to distract your brain enough to not think about what your brain wants to be overthinking about. And then once you do that, you can then kind of just become okay with having anxiety, which I know, if you've got really bad anxiety, sounds like complete, like, unreal stuff. But after a while, it does become, your anxiety just becomes like a feeling. Like when you feel sad, you'll just think, I'm sad, that's it. You don't think too much more about it, which is essentially what you want your anxiety to become. So it just basically just becomes a feeling, but it's nothing major. But there is still times it might get big, but then you'll be in a much better place to deal with it. And the more you kind of have it, the less it gets anyway, so in some sense anyway, I should say. The more you control it, the more control you have over it, the better it gets, so it's a thing that does take time though. I mean, I've been trying to overcome my anxiety for, I think, like over 10 years probably. I can't remember when my anxiety started really, but I've had it for a while. But yeah, I've had my anxiety for about 10 years, give or take, and I've been constantly trying to figure out about it and stuff. But it is something that does take a lot of effort, and something you kind of got to be very consistent with as well. Because I know the main thing people say is just don't worry about it. But someone who has anxiety, I know that advice is pretty useless. Even though most stuff I said is kind of don't worry about it. You need to be able to know how not to worry about it, because it's not as simple as just don't worry about it. But if you put effort in, I do believe with time you can get rid of anxiety. Not entirely, but like make it not a bigger, not as a what's the word I'm looking for? Not as big as an obstacle as it may seem, which is my main thing I needed, because I used to always think that whatever I was anxious about used to be like the biggest problem in the world. Until after a while I noticed all the little problems I have, they're not actually nothing to really be anxious about in the first place. Or it's just my brain overthinking, making them seem a lot bigger than what they are. And so once you get that sort of perspective in, you kind of realise most of stuff isn't anything in particular, it's just a little something here and there. Not with what people think of you and stuff, which is like I got rid of by just simply accepting people have their opinions. I can't change that, that is what it is. Like, it's out of my control, because I can't force people to think stuff about me. So they're entitled to think what they think, and it's not really my issue what they think. So it's like, that was one thing I used to have quite an issue with, because also when I was at school, not that it's really changed now, but I was never exactly tall. I mean, when I was in year like 10, year 11, I was still like 5'2", 5'-ish, give or take. I don't really matter too much. And as a guy, you can probably imagine, you used to get rinsed a lot for it. But I did find that I never really cared, because I was like, unless there's some magical way I don't know about where you can change it, them stating about it, or like being a dick about it essentially, there's nothing I can physically do about it, so what can I do? Like, I can't just suddenly grow, can I? Because if I could, I would, so But it's that sort of thing, is if you can't change it, and if it's who you are, anyone's opinion of it shouldn't really matter, to be brutally honest. And once you become okay with that fact, people's opinions of you kind of don't matter because you don't really care. Now, does that mean that I want people to be like, if I've offended someone, or if someone's mad at me or whatever, or hates me, I will still feel a little bit weirded out by it, because you do naturally. You're gonna want people to like you, but there's a lot of people. They've all got different opinions. Not everyone's gonna like you, so you might as well just be yourself. And the ones who like you will like you for you. The ones who don't, typically, you don't have to be involved with them, unless it's in a workplace or something. But then, even still, you just don't have to be 100% honest. Like, you can not get on with someone. No, hang on. You could not like someone, but still get on with them, sort of thing. So that's the main thing. And if anyone isn't like unkind to you or whatever, just kind of take it on the shoulder. Like, it's just, yeah. Don't take offence to it, is what I'm saying. Like, people have their opinions, you have your opinions. Like, my main thing is, I found the thing that helped me the most, actually, with that sort of stuff, is me and my mates would always be quite harsh to each other. It's like, any sort of joke available, we had it where we knew it was a joke, so you could say it. And I found where that is, it made me very resilient to any sort of name calling, any sort of nasty comments or stuff, because I used to find it funny, because I would always take it as a joke sort of thing, and if they did mean to offend me, I find it even more funny that they have to go out of their way to offend me, sort of thing. So that was how my brain would always kind of manage to, as then I end up coming to a point where I don't really care what people think, because either if they're trying to offend me, I find it quite amusing. If they're not, then it's not an issue then, is it? So, but yeah, if you do have any concerns or comments, feel free to leave it in the comment description. I will reply to everyone. And I will say this, I said it in my last video about mental health, this is a safe space, so anyone who leaves nasty comments or something, I will get rid of as quickly as possible. So feel free to comment whatever you want, as long as it's either from your perspective, or basically don't be a dick to others. Simple as enough. But like, yeah, I do hope this video helps. If you want to see more videos like this, or something similar to this, or whatever, let me know. I'd be more than happy to do more, because this sort of stuff, I mean, if I had these videos, or just more people speaking back when I was younger, it would have definitely helped a lot of, like, that feeling alone sort of feeling, because no one really, well, back like 10 years ago when I was suffering with anxiety quite bad, I didn't know other people had it. I thought I was the only one, so I was like, if this video can at least help some people understand that, I'll be happy. But yeah, it is kind of a waffle session, but I'm not really good at speaking in any sort of order or stuff, so hopefully this was easy to follow. I've got no idea, I'm kind of just doing this off the top of my head, so I hope it was good. But yeah, if you want to see more, let me know, and I shall see you all next time.